we're going to talk once again about that TNA ECW invasion. Now, for the past weeks, there have been 4 ECW guys, as well, of course, as RVD on the TNA Impact program. 4 of those guys going into the crowd every week and watching the matches. Now, this week they got really heavy in the ring. They interrupted and there was all sorts of confusion at the end of Impact. You had Mick Foley in there and a conclusion with Dixie Carter saying she had invited the guys from ECW.
Yeah, it was a big shock end to TNA this week, and a lot of those mofos from the back working in the office. D'Lo was one that was putting the beat down. Now, I mean, I'm all well and good for this thing, ECW invasion, but I thought it was a bit too much too soon when you've guys like D'Lo coming out and putting the beat down on, who we haven't seen on TV for quite some time. And I didn't even know he was still with TNA, to be honest. But D'Lo's out putting the beat down with the ECW Originals, and yeah, I just thought it was a bit too much too soon. And unless they've got a trick up their sleeve. But then if Heyman is involved, where does it go? And I know we're still waiting in anticipation of this big surprise or whatever, but I don't know. I wasn't too down with it. It was a little bit okay in small doses, but when the back came out and then your Team 3Ds were putting the beat down and anyone who was ECW, they didn't really, I don't know, explain it so much with those guys getting involved. I think they should have been some sort of communal gathering of all the ECW heads, even for 1 week before they did that. I think it just really, I'd say for people who didn't know and your casual button pushers, they were probably like, what the fuck is this all about?
That's exactly it. The casual viewer, I often wonder, not all of us were around when ECW was on TV. Not everybody remembers the original ECW. Of course, everybody has seen the legacy and the history in video packages on the new ECW. But it certainly never represented the old, and there was a lot of guys in there that haven't been seen in a while. And yes, you do wonder what these people are thinking. Do they get it? Do they find it relevant? Do they think it's something that's worth the next couple of months, especially when you've got NXT invasions going on the other side? But I suppose the big question on everyone's lips is Paul Heyman, and now with Dixie Carter involved in the angle, saying that she's brought these guys in, you presume that maybe Dixie is trying to transition from Bischoff and Hogan to Heyman. But what can Heyman bring? Certainly a lot of fans respect Heyman. They know that his controversial angles will be accepted on TNA now. They are, if you like, the TV14 alternative, which basically means you've got a lot more room to do controversial stuff.
Yeah, you really do have a lot of room, and we definitely saw TNA's shoot at WWE with the Sarita Taylor Wilde chokeout and the necktie, and Taz's reference to you wouldn't get away with this in other companies or whatnot, but full on shoot, which was quite funny, a nice little segment out of TNA. But I think with ECW, I don't know, I mean, now the two companies are very close, I think, with their storylines, really. We said this already with Nexus and the ECW invasion, and it's a little bit close to home on both sides, I think, but again, shit happens. So there was a good point I was going to make about ECW, but I can't fucking remember what it was.
We will get back to it because I think there's a lot of mileage in this topic. It's certainly one that people have been talking about. I think after NXT, a lot of people have Paul Heyman on their minds right now and what his involvement could be.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to say. Like, a lot of people have said it's all about the money with Heyman, and this week it comes out that he wants 25 to 30 million over 5 years of a contract with TNA. Now, that's a lot of fucking money for a guy. Is he worth that much, really? And how much can he change it, like we said last week, if he's going to be stuck in that fucking Impact zone?
He's certainly a great worker, and those type of figures you're talking about, he's quoting, he is doing his very best to sell himself as high as possible and get those figures out there. To be honest with you, that sounds like a kind of a swerve where he maybe wants them not to offer him any job. Maybe he's trying to tell those guys, you can't afford me, and then it's just a sort of a rib, a joke, talking about 20 to 30 million over a few years. I mean, what's Bischoff gotten out of this? I wouldn't say he's done much more than $1 million. I mean, let's be fair. They don't have that kind of revenue to be handing out to everybody. But I mean, I think Heyman also has a lot of enemies in TNA. I mean, let's just even talk about those 4 guys: Richards, Dreamer, Rhino, and Raven. Those 4 guys surely have had dealings.
You know, if they're getting a spot on TV, they're getting paid, and they're still in the business, then I don't think those guys give a flying fuck as long as they're getting their checks cashed at the end of the day.
That's exactly it. It's a business where you've got to pick up a check at the end of the day. TNA and ECW with their invasion, again, it's a recycled storyline. This is something that WWE did a long time ago, and it again makes you wonder, you know, you have to have those connections, the old school characters brought back, but you want to bring a new audience in as well. I mean, like you mentioned, those new people who haven't got a clue what this is all about. In fact, if there's, you know, a predominantly new audience who don't recognise Heyman at all, what would be the point in doing it, really?
This is it, and especially with those guys now being a little bit, not washed up, but I mean, Dreamer's been around the block. Stevie Richards certainly has been around the block too. All of them, Raven, all of those guys. I think what would be interesting and fun is to bring in, but then it might just not make sense, the Ring of Honor guys as a stable somehow, even as a tester, but I know that's not going to happen. But that would make it a bit more legit than something that's been done with the same guys pretty much when WWE had their invasion. So it's totally rehashed, and I mean, all those guys there's nobody really interested in out of those. I don't think Dreamer ever really appealed to me. Nor did Stevie Richards. Raven, maybe a little bit. And who else is there?
Rhino.
Right, yeah, well, the less said about Rhino, the better. But, yeah, I think just, I don't know. Maybe if Heyman does come in, that might be interesting for about 5 minutes. But if he doesn't, yeah, it's just, forget about it.
Well, thinking about it, my thoughts on those guys one by one. Stevie Richards has had some airtime now over the past few months as Dr. Stevie. He's now been reverted to the name Stevie Richards. Of course, quite a good thing for him when he got that name from WWE and they didn't try and change his name. I mean, God be with the days when they didn't rename a guy Lucky Cannon. And it's so unbelievable that guys actually make their way out of that territory with the name intact. I mean, David Otunga is another guy who's going to have a bit of a gold mine on his hands on the independents in a few years' time, maybe, if he doesn't last that long. But I think really, Stevie Richards, I'm a little bit bored there. I've seen him and I actually would have preferred the Dr. Stevie thing to go ahead, maybe. Rhino, now I know, you made your thoughts clear on him there, and I suppose he's a guy who I've always liked the spear type move he does, but that's probably about it. But I have to say about him, when I sort of tuned into ECW maybe 2000, he was actually a guy I noticed for some reason, and I always felt like there was better things maybe you could do with him. And I think he does those kind of shouty promos as well, which aren't too bad. But quickly, I think Dreamer, we've seen it all there. That's done and dusted, I think. And who was the last guy? Always forgetting the last.
Raven, is it?
Raven. Now, again, he's had time. He's been in the Monsters Ball and all sorts of things. But I always like to see him back there, actually. For some reason, he's another guy who I kind of like the character.
Yeah, I like the Raven kind of gimmick too. Doesn't really get old, and I don't know, he's just kind of something appealing about him. I think that's another thing that destroyed Rhino and Dreamer was WWE, where they come out of what they were and their whole persona and ECW gimmick into the Stamford way of thought, and sometimes that's not exactly appealing to anyone. And I think after watching so many ECWs, or WWE ECW should I say, with Dreamer, and putting guys over and whatnot, and just it just ruined him for me. And I think Rhino too, when his WWE stint was good enough, but when he got to TNA, became stale very quickly, I think.